Hello and welcome to another episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Joy Ravella. A little bit of a fun fact for you. You may not know this, but I'm an afternoon host on our radio station, 89.9 The Light, and you don't have to be living in Melbourne to listen to this radio station. You can listen to it online, and all the details are on our website at thelight.com.au, because if you really love this podcast, I think you are going to absolutely love the radio station. Right now, though, we are taking a look at a great verse that's all about putting other people's needs before your own. Easy to say, very hard to do. Let's get into today's Bible verse.
John 15:13. Jesus said, "This is the very best way to love. Put your life on the line for your friends." And that's from the Message.
Once again, I have the amazing Sharon here in studio with me from Celebrate Messiah, connecting Jews across Australia to Jesus. And you can find out more about what they do at celebratemessiah.com.au. Sharon, today we're taking a look at a verse that is all about loving people. And today, especially with Mother's Day around the corner, we're focusing on loving the little people in our world.
Yes, no pressure. Loving others in particular doesn't come easy to me. In my carnal nature, in my basic nature, I am rigged for self-promotion. You know what I'm talking about. I like to look after number one. That's me at my core. So this verse turns that on its head. And it's the opposite of my natural impulse. So how can I possibly love like that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it takes intentionality, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. We are naturally wired to look after our own needs, and it takes the grace of God to remind us to look outside of ourselves. And it's really hard, because often loving others means putting your needs second or putting them last. And that's really hard to do. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on this episode. I know you've got a really powerful story to share around that. But what does this verse tell you about who God is or what matters to him?
Yeah, well, God, as usual, the perfect gentleman, leads the way for me to follow. And the Bible is full of examples of God's love to me. And of course, the ultimate example being Jesus' death on the cross for me, to give me eternal life with God. So when I spend time reading the Bible and praying to God, and when I remember that God knows me fully, even in all my selfish nature, and He loves me fully, that opens my eyes to see other people through God's eyes. And God changes my heart to love other people with God's love, with His love. And He then gives me opportunities to practice living and loving His way, not my way. And certainly that's been the story of my walk of faith with God.
Yeah, loving His way, which can often mean us having to do things we might not naturally want to do. But again, it comes down to living the way God has asked us to live, to love those around us, and to be self-sacrificial in the way God sacrificed His Son for us. So He models it, like you said before. And then as we walk with Him, we get the opportunity to model it for others. So how has this verse and loving other people come alive in your world?
Yeah, well, when I became a believer, and I first learned about Jesus and loving others in a way that was going to cost me, a sacrificial way, it took a while for it to sink in. And look, I'm not proud of it, but it's still sinking in 40 years later, and it's still growing and developing with God's grace. Like you said before, it's all about God's grace and patience and walking with us. So when I became a mum quite a while ago, and I had 2 little boys, my career was just taking off. I was a junior lecturer at the University of Melbourne. I lectured in languages and cultures of the ancient Near East. It was fascinating, it was demanding, it was exciting, it was a rewarding job, and I was living the dream. But I was also starting to see that my boys weren't coping so well with my brilliant career. Particularly my younger boy, who was a shy young person. He was a bit anxious. He used to hide behind my skirts. Literally, he used to hide behind my skirts when people came for a visit. He was very shy. he wasn't coping with the hustle and bustle of my busy life. And I was starting to get a bit worried for him. I cut my hours, I watched, but it wasn't quite enough for this little person. My heart was going out to him. But, in this society, we're told you can have it all. You can have the happy family, the brilliant career, and I wanted to see if I could just hang in there until he was old enough to go to school. Well, one day, my boss came to me and she said she'd managed to get some funding, open a door for me. It was a huge all-or-nothing opportunity, and she was going to turn my position into a full-time lectureship role, take it or leave it. Oh my goodness. Everything I ever wanted.
It's your dream job.
My dream job, my dream life. Doing more and more and more of what I loved doing. But what do? I knew deep down that my little boy would pay the price. I just couldn't do it to him, Joy. I just couldn't do it. He needed me. So I turned it down. She wasn't happy. She was very narky about the whole thing. But I did turn it down, and so I suddenly had no job at all, and I became a full-time mum. It was the best thing I ever did, Joy. For him, for those years that he needed me. He needed me to be with him.
Yeah.
He needed me to be for him. And so I never did become a brilliant academic, but I did learn about the best way to love. And I know I made the best choice.
Wow, what a sacrifice. I'm thinking of an episode we did not too long ago titled Stay at Home Mum, and go back and have a listen to it. Essentially was just a big thank you from us kids.
I listened to that episode with Ash.
Yeah.
So beautiful. I know my heart went out to her and her mum and her grandma.
Yeah.
So lovely. And my kids often come to me today and they quote that verse from Proverbs 31, and her children call her blessed. And my heart melts with contentment when I hear my beautiful kids say that to me as their way of saying thank you for laying aside something I really wanted for myself in a selfish way and giving them something far better, and giving myself something far, far better, richer, bigger, deeper in return. So I thank my kids as well.
Going back to that moment where that dream job was offered to you, you had everything right there, everything you had worked for, hoped for, could ever dream of. Did it ever seem to you in that moment that maybe this was God's plan for you, if everything just happened so perfectly? And how did you pick between two dreams? Because I think that's sometimes the wrestle. It's, yes, I want my children to have a beautiful life. Yes, I want to be there with them, but I also have my own dreams. And sometimes in the moment, it can seem really hard to pick between the two, to pick God's voice between the two. How did you make that distinction?
Yeah, actually, for that particular decision, it wasn't difficult at all, because God had been priming my heart to have a look at this little boy and to hear his distress and his concerns. And so I knew, deep down, that my career was costing this little boy. And so I wanted to, for me, it was a clear-cut choice.
Did you ever have moments once you made the decision where you either doubted it, or I suppose what I'm asking is, sometimes making that decision is the easy part, but the hard bit is those quiet nights, or those moments years or months later when things aren't going as well, and you kind of say to yourself, I wonder what life would have been like if I had taken the other path. And those can be really dangerous trains of thought where you live in a reality that doesn't actually exist. Did you ever have moments like that? And in those moments, how did you console yourself? Yeah,
look, I did have many moments like that when I kind of fantasized about what my career would have been like. But that's all they were. They were fantasies. God doesn't tell us other people's stories, and he doesn't tell us the what ifs of our choices. What if I'd married someone else? What if I'd had different children to the ones I have? All these what ifs are just fantasies, and they are distractions, certainly in my life, they would be distractions. And so, yes, I did have moments. There were moments of weakness for me, and I'm not proud of them, where I fantasized about my could have been, should have been brilliant career. I think God is still teaching me to love, and to love the best way. And I'm grateful for Him to giving me the opportunity to make, in hindsight, not a big sacrifice really, in comparison to what I got back in return.
The verse today is John chapter 15, verse 13. Jesus said, "This is the very best way to love. Put your life on the line for your friends." I'm going to wrap up today's podcast episode in a different way. Usually I leave you with some points to think about, some application. But what I'm going to do with today's episode is to allow you 30 seconds of time to ask yourself one question, and then we'll wrap up the episode. There's going to be some music that plays in the background, and so whether you're driving, whether you're out and about, whatever you're up to, I hope that you can stay with this moment. Truly answer this question in your heart and invite God into it. My question to you today is this: is there someone in your life that you need to love in a more sacrificial way? Is there someone in your world that you need to love more in a sacrificial way, putting them first? So I'll give you a little bit of time to think about that question. I'll ask it one more time. Is there someone in your world that you need to love in a sacrificial way? Well, that wraps up today's episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. I hope you enjoyed having a few moments to think and ponder. I think that's really important, especially when you hear powerful stories like Sharon's that really make you pause and stop and think. We've got to snatch those moments and allow God to speak into our lives. If you do have any feedback, any questions for Sharon, you can send through an email to everydayjoy@positivemedia.com.au. I look forward to catching up with you tomorrow.